Hi everyone, and welcome back to the channel. In this video I'd like to cover an introduction to MVVM, the design pattern, with ESAPI and binary plugins. So first I'd like to review the messiness of creating a UI in a single file plugin, and if you've been following along or if you've seen any of the other videos, then you'll know that we've been creating a conformity index or a conformity check script in a single file plugin, and we've as of now we've added a view, or like a user interface, and it's all in the single file and it's just really messy. So I'm just gonna open that and we can just kind of skim through it and just see how complex and confusing it can be. And then after that, we'll create a binary plugin, and then we will review the process of adding a view, like in other WPF projects. And then we'll go through the steps to incorporate the MVVM design pattern in our binary plugin. And then, time permitting, I'd like to go ahead and generate a template and cover that so that we can use that in the future. And it's very simple, it's very straightforward, but I would like to go through the steps of explaining it and that sort of thing. So anyway, with that, let's go ahead and I'm going to open the script wizard, and I'm going to select my path, and this will be in the GitHub. And so I have this MVVM using a ESAPI folder that I want to create this in, and I'm just going to name it Intro to MVVM. And we'll just say Intro to MVVM. That's fine. And I'm going to select binary plugin, and then select create, and then it's going to ask if I want to open up Visual Studio, and I selected yes, and so I can minimize this for now. Okay, so I'll go ahead and push, and this will send this initial project to the GitHub account, or to the repository. So we'll just say created MVVM intro project. Commit. I'll save it. And saved solution. And I'll commit, save, and push. Okay, so that should be up to date now. All right. So in our project, if you notice, a binary plugin is all it has is a single file. So this is not a complex project. All it is a DLL. It's a class library. So if you select project and then go to whatever you named it, the properties down at the bottom, then in the build tab, well, actually in the application tab, you'll see that it's by default is a class library, okay? And it's going to be built, probably made using the framework 4.5. There are newer frameworks, but that's the one that is commonly used for like ESAPI, at least in version 15. Okay, so, and then if you go to build, if you want to change where it builds, then you can do that here. So the key things, and I've talked about this in other videos, but we'll just review it really quickly. The key things about projects that are generated by the script wizard is that it already has this x64. And this is like how it's going to build too. So if we open back up those properties, then in the build tab, we'll see that the platform target is for x64, and that's because the other option would be x86, right? Or any CPU, which I guess would be either or whatever. But in order to run your script in Eclipse, you need this to build with a target of x64. So if you've created your own script on your own, and you know, like it's a DLL or a standalone or something like that, and it's not running, then there could be a possibility that you haven't selected that. So you always want to remember to do that when you're starting from scratch and you create your own script without the use of the script wizard. So a class library. So this is going to build to a DLL, and then the other thing that you need to remember when using, and I'm sorry if this is hard to see, but up here in this assembly name, if you're not using the script wizard, then you need to end the name of your script with .ESAPI. So by default though, because we use the script wizard, it named it intro to MVVM .ESAPI. And then once you build, it's going to add on .dll. Well, the way that when you go in Eclipse, when you select tools and then scripts, in order for it to see your script, it needs that .ESAPI, or it needs to end in .cs. So it just needs to be a single file, right? And so if you don't see your script and you've built a DLL, then just remember that it needs to be named .ESAPI, like at the end, before the .dll. Okay, so those are some of the basics. And so again, all this looks very similar to the single file plugin, right? And so we just have this public class script, and then it has a constructor, an empty constructor, and then it excuse me, and then it has this public void execute method. And so when you run, so these are called plugins, right? So when the idea is that they have to be run in Eclipse, okay? So what Eclipse does is it looks for this namespace. So this is another thing that you have to have with a plugin. This is not necessary if it's like a standalone or something like that, but where the execute method is, you need this namespace, and then you need a public class script. I'm really not sure if you need a blank constructor, but they create one. I've just never tested it. And then you don't need this. This has to do with optimization of the code at like runtime or at build, I guess. Well, it might be at runtime. I'm really not sure. But anyway, it has to do with optimization of code. So, and then public void execute. So then it's going to look for this namespace, this script, and then, or this class, and then this method. So you just need to add all of your code into here, okay? And that's why they add this little to do whatever. Okay, so here you have access to this window, okay? And we'll go ahead and just comment the rest of that out. And I know that we've covered comments before, right? You generally have these two lines, or if you're above a class, maybe you have, a summary or something like that. But if you're in a single line and you want to, in the middle of the line, if you want to add a comment, you can use this / asterisk or asterisk, and then followed by the opposite order at the end, and then anything in between that will be commented out. So you can see an example of that there. And also, if you highlight something in the middle of a line, and then you select Control KD on a Windows machine, then it will, Control KC, it will comment the contents that you've selected out as well. Now, if you just have your cursor on that line and you select Control KC, then it will just do that whole line. But anyway, okay. So now we have this. We have access to a window, and I believe that Eclipse will handle the window launching, of itself. So if you're familiar with using a window, then you might be familiar with writing window show dialog or show. I don't believe that that's required. I think that once your script ends, then I think it will, like after you set the content, I think if you have show dialog at the end, I believe that it may just show a blank screen, a blank window once your script is done. So that may be something that if you're having that issue, then that may be your problem. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I'm sure we'll encounter it at some point. Okay, and then so when we created it has these different version settings, and then it has this for if your script is writable. So if you have version 15 or higher, then you have the ability to write to the database, and it just depends on your version and which properties you can set and that sort of thing. So okay, so with MVV, oh, you know what? Actually, if I go back to my to-do, I have forgotten the first step. So the first thing that I wanted to do was to review the messiness. Okay, so let me open, let's see, let me find. So I'm going to open up the conformity checks script just as an example so that we can see how messy and complex that something like this can be. Okay, so we have our private properties here, and then you can see that we've extracted things into methods, so we use abstraction, and then we have some window settings, but then we have these window components. Okay, so from line 79, we'll just say 80 for math, to let's say 200. So 120 lines of our project are solely window components, okay? And this can just be, this is, if you have seen this script, it literally only has a couple of features, right? You select your target, you select the structure that you want to use in order to calculate the volume, the dose at the volume, or the volume at the dose. At the 100% and the 50%, and then there's a button. So I guess there's only 3 components, and it took 120 lines to do that. And when we do this in a window or a user control, we're still going to have a lot of lines, right, of code. We're still going to have code, but it's not going to be as complex as being in the same project. Okay. And so you run into issues when you start to build these things larger and larger, and they become more and more complex. When you have all of the code in your script, in like a single file, it just, when you think about trying to reuse something, or that sort of thing. So down here though, we have all of our methods and that sort of thing. So we will be able to reuse these, but we'll put them in a different file in our project. But anyway, so you can just see like this can get just a little complex. It can get complex very fast, and just trying to read through it and figure out what each of these things. So we've created a combo box. We've set the source and that sort of thing. So anyway, so that's just an example. And what we want to do is we want to start thinking about separating things out into their own components. So we want like a method. We want a method to do a single thing, and we just want to simplify things, break things into their smallest parts that we can. And so we do that with MVVM. So MVVM, I'll just type it out. So stands for model view and view model, or view model. Okay, and So in our other script, you know, we created properties, we didn't actually create any models, but Eclipse created, you know, we're using Eclipse ESAPI models, right? So I don't think that we actually, well, we might have, I can't remember. Eventually we will create our own model, right? But the idea is that we separate each of these components, right? So we want the model to be in its own class, its own file, and we want each class to basically be surrounded, like to have to do with like one thing, right? So if we want to write things about, like, if we want to create like a structures class, we want it to only be about structures. We don't want to also, in that same file, we don't want to also add, you know, other classes. Okay, so those are like models, that things that have properties and behaviors, and those are our objects, right? And then we have a view, and we want to separate the view from the logic behind the view. Okay, so when we create, so if we just right click our project over here, I wish we could make this larger, but I've just right click on the project and I go to add, and let's just add a user control. We can't add another window because there's already a window, so we just need to add a user control, and let's just say sample view. Okay, so when we create a view, there's actually a file beneath it, and this is the code behind this view. So in other examples, you could absolutely create your class in here. You could create things that your logic, you could write your various different logic that is associated with this view. Okay. So this is a sample view of whatever this is. So I'll go into more detail right here, but if we just set the background, then we can see what that looks like, right? And we can change the design, we can change the width, the height, that sort of thing. And then if we just add something, let's just add in a text block, and we'll say hello ESAPI. Okay, and we'll just say, and then how about vertical alignment center? Okay, and so now if we zoom in, we can see our text. Okay, so this is an example of having a sample view, and in a lot of videos or other tutorials or whatever, you may see a lot of the logic being written behind the view. So this, if you ever hear someone say the code behind, this might be what they're talking about. Okay, so what we want to do though, we want to get away from coupling all of our logic, the view model, with our view. So we want to have these in separate files. Okay, and technically these are technically separate files. This is an XAML file and this is a .cs file, but we want to decouple the view from its logic. Okay, so another way that someone might describe the view model is the business logic. So you would have your view, you would have your data, and the way that you represent your data, right, in your models, and then you would have your user interface, and then you would have the code or the logic that associates the two, right? And so we want to separate them into their three parts. And the reason for that is because when you start designing like user interfaces and that sort of thing, like let's say, time goes on or whatever, and you really don't like the way that you've designed your user interface, right? You don't need to change any of like you're happy with the data, you're happy with the way that it works, you just want to change the way that it looks or whatever. Well, if you've written all of your logic in the view, in the code behind the view, in this XAML.cs file, then in order to change the view, you also have to change your code. As soon as you start to move things around or rename things or whatever, then you really start to break your project. And so the idea is that you could, if you separate it, then all you need to do, if you want to recreate your view, you just recreate a view and then add it into your project. And so it just, when you're thinking about reusability or maintenance, then this is just a cleaner and easier way to do that. Okay, so those are some of the basics of MVVM. It really took me a long time to really understand what we were doing and how to do it, so that's why I want to go over this. Okay, so in order to set up our MVVM file structure, I'm going to just go ahead and delete this sample view. We don't need this anymore. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add in a folder, okay, and I'm just going to call this views, and then I'm going to add another folder, okay, called view models, and then we don't need this now, but you could add in a folder that says models, okay, and so you would put each of these components, these types of component, whatever you're writing, into their respective folders, okay. So we're going to start by creating a main view, and then we'll also create a main view model, okay. And so I'm gonna right click on views and say add new class, and I'm just going to name this main view, and I'm going to make this, oh, you know what, I did class, don't listen to me, delete that. I want to add a user control, sorry about that. So add user control, and this is going to be the main view, and in the main view model I want to add a class, and I want to name this main view model, okay. All right, and then we want to make this class public, okay. And if you want to create a constructor, you can. I don't really think it's necessary right away or whatever, but it very well could be, since we're gonna create a new one later. But you can just type CTOR and then tab, and that will create its empty constructor. And if you think about it, this looks very similar to this, right? So you'll hopefully things like that are starting to make sense. All right, so this is our view, and if you select the either the side-by-side view or the top-bottom view, then you can see your the example of what your code looks like, or what your view will look like based on the code that you have. Okay, so if you want, you can. So the user control is going to be added into the window. So if you want your user control to have its own, if you want to change the background or whatever, you can, and you can do that here. You could also change the background of the window. I'm pretty sure you could, but you would have to do that in here. So, okay, so we have our main view model, and we have our main view, and I'm going to pin this so that it will always be to the left. And then, so in our main view, really all we need to do in order to wire this up, all we need to do is come into our main project file, okay, and that's the intro to MVVM.cs file, and I'm going to create an instance of the main view, So I'm going to say main view, and if I do control dot, because you can see it's complaining with the red line underneath, it says using intro to MVVM.views. So I'm just going to say, I'm going to add that in, so I hit enter. And then I'm just going to say main view, and you could name this like, you know, MV or whatever, equals new main view. Okay, so we could do that. And right now though, this view doesn't know anything about this view model. Okay, these don't inherently know about each other just because they're named main view and main view model. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to set the data context of this main view. Okay, and you can do it, you know, two ways. You could do main view dot data context equals, and we could set it this way. But what I like to do is, instead of closing this, if you use the brackets, now you can, it's just like in, and we'll get into this more when we start to create our own models, but we're setting a property of this class. Okay, so this main view is a class. Okay, and we just need to set the property that is, so let me go down here. So main view, so this is green, right? So this tells us that it's a class. Okay, classes have properties and behaviors, right? So they have methods are the behaviors, and their properties, those are these things. So if I type main view dot, then it gives me a list of all these things. And so then there's also events, right? You can create events associated with a class as well. So these are the properties, this little wrench. So if I click that, you can see all these different properties that are here. Okay. And then if we select methods, then now we can see all of the methods that it has. And these are the behaviors that it can have. And then events are the events that happen that can be triggered, or, you know, whatever inside of it just depends on what type of class and that sort of thing. So when we create this, all we're going to do is we're going to set the property while we create it. So we'll just say data context equals, and we need to create a new instance of our main view model. Okay, so we'll say main view model, and you'll see it's complaining, so control dot again, and it will say using, and then intro to MVVM dot view models. So I'll hit enter, and then you don't need a semicolon there. If you were going to set another property, you could. You would use a comma. Okay, and we can, if you wanted to, you could do this. And if you're setting like a lot of, you know, properties, then you might want to do that. Or you could just leave it like this. This is fine too. Okay. So now these are wired up to each other, and they know about each other. Okay. So, and we can do things like, we can set things in the view, right? Main view dot background, like we can set things here. We just don't want to do them here. Okay. We want to separate, we want to do as little with the view as possible. Okay. Now there's one other thing that we need to do in order to let Eclipse know that we've created this view. And so we need to set the content of the window to the view. And so we're going to do just window.content equals main view. Okay, and that's it. And again, you could say window.show dialog. But I believe that once your script is done, that would just create a blank window. So I'm not really sure. So we're going to set the Eclipse script window content. Okay, and this is to to show our view. And then this is new instance of our main view. User control. And just remember, it needs to be a user control. If we were to add a window to this, it would not be happy. Okay. So I guess we should probably add a couple of things to the main view so that we can show how some of this works, okay? And this is going to it's going to seem a little complex. You know, if you're doing this for the first time, it may seem a little complex, but ultimately it's pretty simple, okay? Once you've done it a few times and that sort of thing. But it really does make your life a lot easier when you're trying to create views or user interfaces for whatever tools that you're trying to create in your clinic or whatever. Okay, so let's see. I don't want to have this be too terribly long. Okay, we're already at 30 minutes, so I think let's look at our to-dos and see how we've done. Okay, so we've reviewed the process of adding a view, yeah, and we've incorporated the MVVM design or the design pattern rather, and I think that is probably a good place to start or to stop rather. I think all I want to do is let's just add in. Let's set the background to white, okay, or if you wanted like a little gray, like a little off-white, okay, and let's add a border to our thing, okay, and if you've ever used HTML or XML before, then you'll recognize these like tags and that sort of thing. Or this like style, this syntax, right? So we have an open and a closing tag, open and a closing tag, and then you can see here you have an open and a closing user control tag. You don't have to have an open and a closing tag. You could have a, like for our text block, let's just add in a text block. And if we just close it, we can just close it with this syntax, okay? And we can set, for a text box, we can set the text equal to whatever we want, right? And so we can say, hello, ESAPI, okay? And we'll say, in our grid, we'll just say horizontal alignment center, okay? Oh, and then we added a border. So we need to, in order to see our border, we want to set this out away from the edge. So let's add a margin of 20, okay? But then if we click out of it, we'll see, we still don't see any like line or anything like that. So what it needs is, it needs a border brush, okay? And we could say, you know, like light gray. It's AY, yeah, okay. And we need, and it also needs a thickness. So we have a border thickness, and we could say something like really thick. It is like 5 in order to see it, okay. So now if we zoom in, oh, and then also if you hold down Control and zoom, and like with your wheel, you can zoom in and out. And then something I just relatively recently figured out is if you hold down Shift and scroll with your wheel, you can move side to side. So that actually is kind of helpful. And a lot of times I think you might see like this, but this is just changing your view, okay, or how you see the two or whatever. So okay, so we got hello ESAPI. And then we won't go over binding or anything like that right now because I want to keep this relatively short. so we have that. Oh, and then, you know, these corner edges, they're a little, you know, this is a little thick too. So you could do like 1. And then if you wanted to have rounded edges, then you use corner radius. And you use something like 5 to just soften those edges. Or you could use something like 20. Okay. And that just creates a more you know, modular or modern, you know, or whatever kind of feel that you want. And then you could also say, there's that font is actually not too bad. But if you wanted to change your font, then that's a setting up in your user control up here, where you set your background, that is font family. Okay. And we could use, I kind of like Calibri Light. Okay. Or you could just use Calibri. And I think, you know, that might actually be the default now. I can't remember. No, it's not. Okay, so something else is. But yeah. So I'm just going to use Calibri Light. And I think that's a pretty good, we'll just say, we could do, in here we could say vertical alignment center, bring that down to the middle, and then we could say font size as 20 or maybe 40. Okay. And then, so when we run, if you were to run this in Eclipse, this is what would pop up. Okay. So in order to build it, what you would do, so we haven't added anything that's unique to ESAPI or anything. But when you build it, then you just add in your DLL to whatever, when you go to tools and scripts, you can change your folder, and you can just move the folder to, you know, wherever, or you know, you could build to like a very specific place. That way, when you go to tools scripts, you know, whatever folder you select, maybe you just use the same folder for all of your projects, and then you just change where you build. In your properties, you can change where you build to. So like, let's say we had, like in our GitHub repo, maybe we had like a build folder that was at this level, right? So then every time if we're in Eclipse, then we could just see all of the scripts that we've built, or, you know, whatever. You could do that as well, but we won't do that for now. Okay, and then to build, you just, up here you can select build and then build solution, or you can hit Control-Shift-B, which is the option that I like to use. Okay, so I'm just gonna do Control-Shift-S to save everything, and then Control-Shift-B to build, and that's the assistant. And in our output, we can see that build 1 succeeded. And I can't make that any bigger, it seems. But yeah, so I think, and let's see, I think we could do this really quickly. So if you wanted to save this to, it's like a starting point for in future projects, right? Because we've already created our file structure. Now eventually we're actually going to build this out to where it's even more complex. So then maybe you would want to do it again once we have some other things in place. But you could, if you go up to project, you can, no, you would go to file, and then I think it's under project. Let's see. Okay. Export template. So if you go to project and then export template, and then it's just going to run through this export template wizard. And so we're just going to select this project template. You could also do like specific items, but we're going to use this intro to MVVM and select next. And then our template name, we could say basic MVVM, or we could say binary plugin with MVVM. I think I have too many V's. Can't see them. Okay, man, if I can't see it, there's no way you can see it. And then you can add a template description. So we'll say a basic starting point for a binary, well, we'll say for a Eclipse binary plugin using the MVVM pattern. Okay, and then we don't have an icon, but you can add that or whatever. And then your output location is set by default, and then you can select whether you want to automatically import this into your Visual Studio, and so I have that selected, and we'll just say finish. And so what that did is it opened where, let me minimize this and make this bigger. So it opened this Visual Studio, like I think this is in my documents. Yeah, so OneDrive documents, Visual Studio 2019, and then my exported templates, okay? So this is the first template that I've exported here. So I think it's in documents, and then 2019, and then exported templates, okay? And then the other place is Visual Studio will have its own templates folder, and you can see that there's a bunch here, and then now you can see that it's added this zipped binary plugin with MVVM, and we can test it really quickly. Let's go ahead and close everything. So let's close this. This was our conformity check script. Let's created basic or set up basic MVVM pattern and saved template. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and commit that and push. Okay, and now we can close this. And so now if we open up Visual Studio just in and of itself, let's do create new project, because normally we've used the wizard, and now let's just search if it shows up. There it is. Okay, so that only took a few minutes, and so now if we select this, then it's not going to, it gives us the option to rename it, right? So we're going to name it new awesome project, and then you could name your solution name something else, which is probably a good practice, and we could change our location. So let's just go ahead and do I'll put this in a different, let's see, I'll put this in the testing folder. Okay, and we'll click create. That way it doesn't muddy up our repository. And let's see. Okay, so it saved the x64, which is good. And we have our main project file, right? And all of that set up. And then we also have our main view and our main view model. And this should already say hello ESAPI, which it does. And there you go. So this is a good way, once you've done, you don't want to have to keep redoing, like re-adding all these folders and all that stuff. So we'll probably just start from this point later on and then add some stuff to, we'll kind of go into how to link up your business logic with your, the logic in your view model to your view, so that as things happen, it updates your view. We'll cover some of those basics as we go along. But yeah, and then once we get, once we set some of those things up, then we'll we'll create a new template that will have some other things that we'll want to use more regularly. All right, so with that, I hope that this video has been helpful, and I hope that you have a great day. Well, actually, let me say just really quickly, if you have anything that you would like to cover, or if you have any questions or anything like that, just be sure to leave a note in the comments, and I'll do my best to get to those. And then also, if you have any suggestions for like future videos or anything like that, anything that you'd like to see covered or done or whatever, just let me know. Okay. All right. Hope you have a great day.